IVM. Hello, we're Team Splainer. Welcome to an all-new episode of Decode, a weekly podcast where we take Splainer's mission to declutter the news one step further. Check out our newsletter for more stories and follow us at SplainerIn to keep up with all the fun things we plan for our Splainer fans. So sit back, relax, and don't let the news give you the blues. I'm Prafula, your host for the day, and we have a full house with Vagda, Sara, and Splainer trainee Nivedita. As usual, we have 3 segments for you. For our big story, we're looking at how the Kashmir Files depicts what happened to the Kashmiri Pandits in 1990. In our Food for Thought segment, we're talking about Florida's Don't Say Gay bill and what it means for representation. And in our final segment, we are roasting and toasting our fave and least fave items. Now, on to our big story. Unless you've been living under a rock, I'm assuming you've heard of Vivek Agnihotri's latest film, The Kashmir Files, and it makes for perfect podcast fodder. Both the film and its director are magnets for controversy, and it's received 2 thumbs up. Our PM and everybody and their mother won't stop talking about it. Now, the film has also received immense support because it has received tax exemptions from several states like UP, Tripura, Goa, Haryana, Uttarakhand. In Karnataka, the Assembly Speaker arranged for a special showing for ministers in the state, and the Madhya Pradesh government has making the film tax-free, has urged theatre owners not to hike its ticket prices. The state home ministry has also provided a special leave for cops to watch the film with their families. So what's the big deal around it, and how accurate is this film? From what I've read online, the film revolves around Kashmiri Pandit, Krishna, who lives with his grandfather in Delhi and is a student at this film's version of JNU. When Krishna's grandfather dies, he travels to Kashmir to spread his ashes and meets a couple of his grandfather's friends, who then tell Krishna about how his family was killed by militants in Kashmir. Until this point, Krishna believes that his family has died in an accident and has apparently been so brainwashed by a leftist professor in college that he struggles to believe that this actually happened. So,
oh my God.
I know.
I just want to see Agnihotri's version of JNU. That's going to be the singular reason why I want to watch this movie.
Dude, and they haven't even made an attempt to change it because apparently it's called ANU. I went to the Wikipedia and they had something linked. So I thought they'd have like the name of this fictional university. It links directly to the JNU page. They've not made a single attempt to hide anything. But we've heard so much about the depiction of violence against Pandits, and this has clearly left an impression on moviegoers. Some say, oh, their third eye has been opened and now they know the truth. And others, have called it propaganda. Others still were so moved that they began sloganeering in movie theaters. So while it does depict the plight of the Pandits in Kashmir, I think it also has turned people towards hate speech. The week of its release, there were videos where people outside theaters urged other Hindus to stay away from Muslims to keep themselves out of harm's way. But for a film that has evoked such strong reactions, really, how accurate is it? The film claims that some 4,000 Pandits were killed during this time period due to militancy, and that 5 lakh more were displaced. From what I understand, the film would also have us believe that only this one community was affected by terrorism while the rest sat back and watched. So what really happened in January 1990, and what were the events that led to so much discord in the state to begin with?
Okay, so the whole exodus is a lot to unpack. And just like we've clearly established, a 2-hour, 50-minute movie can't do justice to the tragedy. Our 20-minute segment on the pod can't possibly be enough either. So we fully acknowledge this and actually suggest you read our 2-part explainers on the Great Kashmiri Pandit Exodus to get a big picture view on what really happened. Now that that's out of the way, I'm going to try and look at the state's dysfunctional political history to make sense of how we even reached the Exodus. So in 1947, the princely state of Jammu and Kashmir became a part of the Indian nation. By 1950, the constitution came into force alongside Article 370, which accorded special status to the state. Now, the first prime minister of the state, as the post was called back then, was Sheikh Abdullah. However, within just a few years, he was put behind bars on accusations of plotting secession. Then came Indira Gandhi's government at the center, where she struck a deal with Abdullah. He gave up his call for Azadi and boom, became the CM of a Congress government, no less. Then there were a series of power tussles between the center and the state, with governments coming in and out of power. But the valley really took a sharp turn towards militancy by the year 1987, when Rajiv Gandhi, along with the Abdullah Sayyid Farooq, infamously rigged the election. This blatant repression of democratic principles was a turning point that opened the floodgates of militancy in the valley. Now, leaders who had democratically stood for elections in 87 would soon take arms and choose to be part of organizations like Hizbul Mujahideen. By 1989, thanks to the Bofors scandal, the Congress lost out and in came VP Singh's government in the center. He appointed Mufti Muhammad Saeed as his home minister, and within 6 days of the appointment, Saeed's daughter was kidnapped by the JKLF. This brought the central government down to the talking table, and they had to release the JKLF's top commanders from prison, which in turn gave rise to what were the seeds of a full-blown secessionist movement in the state. From then on, militants in the state became more blatant, and they began the targeted killing of Pandits who were now seen as the other. The state suffered from blatant political interference from the union government, all of it which for the union government was designed just to bring Jammu and Kashmir tightly under its control. The effect, however, ended up only fueling Kashmiri rage against the outsiders, and which eventually turned the Pandits into collateral damage, who were trapped between political expediency and the rising frenzy for Azadi. So the violent precursor to the fateful night of January 1990, which was the exodus began, so to say, was a spate of killings in the state. Prominent Kashmiri Pandits, men and women, were gunned down, all in the midst of a bloody campdown that was supervised by the then governor. Now, beyond this, the facts get hazy because, like Prafula explained, the number of Kashmiri Pandits killed by terrorists or even those who fled the state are far from tallyable. So, Nivedita, can you just shed light on the sheer range of how wildly different the numbers are?
Thanks, Sara. So there's no proper confirmation on the exact numbers. One of the things we need to understand about the Exodus is that nobody has confirmation on the exact numbers. Absolutely no one. Not the general public, not the government, and certainly not this movie. While there are particular names and people who have been confirmed dead, the exact number of Kashmiri Pandits killed or displaced varies. This may be due to the fact that Kashmiri Pandits are just a small subsection of Hindu Brahmins. Then we have the displaced Hindus, displaced people of other castes and faiths, and finally Kashmiri migrants. Kashmiri migrants include all the Kashmiri Hindus and people of other faith. Now, on to debunking these myths. According to this movie, 5 lakh Kashmiri Pandits were forced to migrate. This is simply not possible, really not possible. According to the 1981 census, the total Hindu population in Kashmir was simply 1,25,042 people. This is the total Hindu population. The total number of people forced to migrate varies from source to source, as like there's no exact thing right now for us. The government website said it was 60,000 families. A researcher named Alexander Evans estimated the number between 1,60,000 and 1,17,000. Interestingly enough, former Chief of Army Staff General N.C. Vij, who also hails from Jammu, put the number in his book at 4 lakh. So, usually when asked about the number of migrant Kashmiri Pandits, the central government answers with the total number of Kashmiri migrants, not simply Pandits. That category includes people from all the faiths. The latest count offered by BJP government is in 2021 is 44,167 Kashmiri migrant families, of which only around 39,782 were Hindu. So the rest were people of other faiths. The numbers are constantly updated every year and change. At one point, the highest, the number was estimated at 60,000 families. But again, Pandits are only a subcategory of the Kashmiri Hindus. But what is undeniable is that by the end of 1990, the Pandit community and Kashmir had virtually disappeared. Currently, there are only 800 families left in the valley. Most of the refugees settled in Jammu or Delhi. Now, the exact number of Kashmiri Pandits killed by extremists is uncertain. In 2011, the Home Ministry replied to a query in the Lok Sabha that the total number was 219 since 1989. So, there's a long period and only 219 confirmed deaths. In the same year, the Kashmir Pandit Sangharsh Samiti said the number based on their surveys was 399. But the more likely number is 650 in the last 20 years. But here is the main number. 302 people were killed in 1990 alone. So the number really varies even today and there is no confirmation. The Sangharsh Samiti also made it clear that it does not agree with the propaganda that 3,000 to 4,000 Pandits were killed in Kashmir. And obviously, Agnihotri's movie offers this number. Panan Kashmir, it's an organization that wants a separate homeland for Kashmiri Pandits, put the number at a more reasonable at 1,341. Still very high, but much lower than the propaganda number.
So the movie severely overcounts and the government severely undercounts is the bottom line.
I think so too.
The government's point was that no one is talking about the Pandits and it needs to be spoken about.
So on that note, we come to the end of our first segment. We will be right back after a short break. You are listening to Press Decode on the IVM Podcast Network.
Habits? Routines? How exactly do they help us get better? Well, to simplify it for you, tune in to the Habit Coach podcast. I am Ashton Doctor and I'm going to be here to help you get better daily with some simple, easy to do habits that you can easily adapt to your life. So tune in to the Habit Coach podcast from Monday to Friday because I believe that awesome lives start with awesome habits.
Hello and welcome back to Press Decode on the IVM Podcast Network. We're Team Splainer and make sure to follow us at SplainerIn on Instagram and Twitter to keep up with the Splainer fam. In today's Food for Thought segment, we are talking about Florida's Don't Say Gay bill and how it affects queer representation in media. So the Don't Say Gay or Parental Rights in Education bill, as it is formally known, restricts teaching kids about gender identity and sexual orientation. So any lessons of this kind, quote unquote, may not occur in kindergarten through grade 3 or in a manner that is not age appropriate or developmentally appropriate for students in accordance with state standards. What this means is in conservative red states, it will never be age appropriate for kids to learn about sexual identity. And this could definitely restrict conversations around queerness completely if the school district or county so feels the need. The bill also lets parents sue the school or any particular teachers if they bring up these topics. The bill, of course, has received overwhelming support from Republicans in the House of Representatives and Governor Ron DeSantis. And why are we talking about this? In the last week, Disney removed a kiss between a same-sex couple in the new animated film Lightyear. The scene was reinstated when employees pushed back, and on Tuesday, several Disney employees staged a walkout in protest of how Disney treats its queer characters. So how are the two related? Given that Walt Disney World, the happiest place in the world, is located in Florida, the company has had an annual $75.2 billion economic impact along with an additional $5.8 billion that goes into the state tax revenue. DeSantis and Disney CEO Bob Chapek also met to discuss the bill, after which the governor mocked Disney for being woke. Yes, the very same Disney that skirts around controversial topics by cutting scenes between queer characters or tries to make their characters not so gay. For example, innocent physical affection between characters in Luca and Turning Red were toned down, so to speak, but has still been the focus of fierce debate about inappropriateness when the films were released. And the company does its best not to get its films banned in conservative places in China where its viewership is huge. Like the 2020 Pixar film Onward was banned in Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia because a female character vaguely alludes to a girlfriend. In Russia, the term was changed to partner. The authors for the Don't Say Gay bill may say that the bill is protecting young children from inappropriate influences, but all it really does is make acceptance more difficult and conversations, especially for young queer kids, more dangerous. Representation is tricky, yes, but we have a very real problem if there's outrage over an innocent show of affection. I mean, think about it. How many times as kids did we encounter uncomfortable, if not over-the-top explicit scenes between straight characters, and how barely anyone thought it was inappropriate enough to pass legislation around, right?
Yeah. I'm just thinking about how these children in Florida how they're supposed to deal with families with LGBTQ folks. I mean, US legalized same-sex marriage in 2015 in all the states. So soon you'll have a kid sitting in class who is asked to talk about his family or make a drawing of them. That's common, right? Because considering little children, their families are their whole world. And when you go to school, you talk about these things. So it's pretty common. But the kid likely has two moms. So how's the teacher going to deal with this when other kids ask him, the teacher, what's going on with this child? The American Psychological Association has come out against the Don't Say Gay bill, saying that banning discussion on the topics basically translates to identifying as LGBTQ is inherently wrong, stigmatizing and marginalizing children who may realize their difference at a young age. Now, this may also lead to social isolation and stigma, resulting in depression, anxiety, self-harm, and even suicide. So it's important to talk about it. And that makes me think about where we are in India in terms of LGBTQ information in schools. Now, homosexuality was still a crime till all of us were in school. Yeah? Am I getting that right about age?
Yes, you are.
Yeah, but beyond sexual orientation, school was pretty unwelcoming to anybody who did not toe the gender identity lines. The school administration didn't necessarily or always engage in unwelcoming behavior, but it facilitated and ignored imposition of cishet norms in school social setups. And
not even that it did not engage. At some points, it even penalized anything that was not cishet. Maybe not outrightly penalized, but there was, even simple things like, oh, boys don't cry. We were taught that since kindergarten.
Yeah.
Yeah, and have you ever had teachers make fun of like kids who may not be completely gender conforming, like a very effeminate boy or a sort of tomboyish girl?
Yes.
Like,
Yes, a lot in my school. And it happened not only with teachers not being good to the kids, but mainly students bullying the effeminate boy, the so-called effeminate boy.
I saw a lot of that. That's what I'm saying. I saw a lot of that happening in like peers. I don't exactly remember if my teachers, they let it happen. I don't remember instances of them doing it.
I think the worst trope that also always pissed me off was if one of the sporty girl on farewell, she wore a sari, like, oh my God, you can do that as well. And I'm just like, it's a whole, right? There are such binaries, ugly binaries that were just inbuilt among students, teachers, and the entire culture that you had to be a certain way to pull off a sari, apparently.
You're just boxed in. There's no room for exploration or anything. There's just boxes. No coloring outside the lines.
Have you guys heard that song, Little Boxes?
No.
Okay, so I'm going to put the link in the description. It's really nice. I don't remember the name of the artist. It's an old song. So I'll just put the link in the description. It's a really, really poignant song. Okay. But see, point is that schools did not help us about telling us anything about identities beyond these gender binaries. So if it is not going to come from school, where will it come from? Media. And if a queer student does not find support in her peers, she is likely to find solace in media that speaks to her character. So let's talk about our sweet little Bollywood. When Shubh Mangal Zyada Savdhan released, everyone touted it as the arrival of homosexual narratives in Indian cinema. But Professor Madhavi Menon, who is a historian of desire in India, she disagreed. She basically said that our old Bollywood movies are full of queer content. We just need to look at it, that it does not need to be explicitly in your face queer to be queer. And while I agree with that, I'm all for subtle narratives. I think it's important to put these things out explicitly also, just to normalize it. If I can watch a straight couple kiss in movies, I start to think it's normal. If I get to see an older woman masturbate on screen, think lipstick under my burqa, I start to think that's normal. Same thing applies to violence, by the way, sadly. So then why hush up something that will help normalize something that is normal? I should be able to see same-sex kisses and queer identities on screen. So can we see how far we've gotten on that front?
I think here I just want to come in first and say it's also right when you have to look so hard to see the queer narrative, it's also about, oh, you need to be subtler even in life.
Yes.
Yes.
You know, I was watching that Andy Warhol documentary last weekend. And there was this one instance where somebody talking about Andy was saying that how he was accepted into the art world, even though he thought he was an outsider. A lot of people did think that he was an outsider. He wasn't in your face gay. And that's how he was let in, you know? He's just a nice artist gay.
What does that
The
even
nice artist
mean?
gay.
What does that even mean?
You should watch it. It's the first episode.
I'm upset. I understand
Yeah,
what you
yeah.
mean.
That's true.
Okay, so moving back to Bollywood, over the last 2 decades or so, I do have to grant it to the industry. There has definitely been growth from the classic 90s Suraj Bajatya, big, happy, unrealistically straight joint families. I mean, just by sheer virtue of stats, someone had to be gay. To the second decade of the 21st century, where there has been more of an effort to really encapsulate the queer identity. Done well or not, let's look at it. So now, pre-2000s, queer identities were next to non-existent in Bollywood cinema. So yeah, you had to look hard for it and you'd see one here or one there. But except, of course, Deepa Mehta's Fire from 1996, which featured the sister-in-law duo Shubhana Azmi and Nandita Das explore a same-sex romance. And Hush Hush, the movie, also featured the two of them kissing, amongst other things. Now, unsurprisingly, the movie was met with more protest than applause. And honestly speaking, even the queer community wasn't entirely thrilled, considering the couple's sexuality was explored only as a byproduct of a failed straight relationship, of course. But it was still something. Then there were a few other smaller films here and there, be it Girlfriend from 2004 that went to the extent of showing two near-naked women roll around in bed without actually kissing, of course. Then there was My Brother Nikhil in 2005 that dealt with the intersection of AIDS and being gay. There were also some blink and you miss representations, my favorite of which is Jaane Tu, Jaane Na. For those of you who haven't noticed it, yes, I'm not going to spoil it, but I do suggest you rewatch the video for Papu Khan Dance Sala and thank me later. So, but other than that, the movies of that decade didn't do much to really understand the queer lived experiences, except as much as like a comic relief trope. Think Dostana, Kal Ho Na Ho, Partner, even Student of the Year, which was from 2012 for that matter. The homosuggestive scenes were all but to elicit a quick chuckle here and there. Two standout films of the early first decade of the century, however, were Life in a Metro and Honeymoon Travels Private Limited, that featured gay men in straight relationships and the complexities of it and how they went about their lives. Now, they were far, far from perfect and are definitely not the primary aspects of the film's plot, but it was still a step away from like the thoughtless comedy we just revisited. And then came the 2010s, all the way until now, when Madhaladlas and Ladlis totally biglified and yet were like increasingly unapologetic about it.
Thankfully, I really, really agree with Sara, and I'm really happy that the LGBTQ plus cinema in India is moving in such a positive direction. For me, the first time I saw two men kissing each other on screen was Bombay Talkies. I was 12 or 13 at that time, I guess, and it startled me a little, obviously, to watch something non-heterosexual. That was the first time I saw something like this. But I'm really glad I saw it, as it opened my eyes to something beyond the heteronormative lens. Next, Kapoor and Sons was easily first largely commercial movies to portray a gay character without feminizing him. While the plot did not revolve around his sexuality, its storyline was given ample importance. Similarly, Sonam Kapoor's Ek Ladki Ko Dekha To Aisa Laga with Anil Kapoor, his charm and his Punjabiness brought the conversation to the masses in a way that even Kapoor and Sons hadn't even been able to do. On the other hand, while these were largely characters portrayed by adults, Margarita the Straw, starring Kalki Kekla, had her as a student in Delhi University and then New York University, portraying a bisexual character. It handled the topic of disability and sexuality with such brilliance, it left me completely in awe. Aligarh, which portrayed the life story of Professor Siras after a gross invasion of his privacy, left me in tears. From reading here, others, and even the cinema, we come to understand that a lot of people battle internalized homophobia. Some get the happy ending and some don't. But Neeraj Khaiwan, through his short film Geeli Puchi, A Rajiv Dastan, showed that many people may be able to get through something they've been told is wrong for years. Like falling for someone of the opposite gender, some things like caste can still come in their way. In this movie, a married upper caste Hindu woman, her lover's sexuality, but not her caste. This type of intersectionality and the complexity that just started in Indian queer cinema. And I, for one, really, really cannot wait to see where it goes. Talking of recent movies, Badhai Do, The recently released movie, which portrays a lavender marriage, that is, with two homosexual individuals pretend to have a heterosexual marriage, has opened the door to a lot of conversations. Vivek Tejuja, a person I greatly respect, wrote on Twitter that after watching the movie, his mother wished that she had supported him more. It was only
Sorry, I think I want to also come in here, like not to interrupt, but Badhaido was such a refreshingly good watch that I just have to put it out there. Anyone who hasn't seen it, please, 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 please go watch it. Like, I did not expect it, and it was a surprisingly refreshing watch.
It was really refreshing and really heartwarming. Like, we did not expect like a perfect bow-tied Bollywood happy ending, but it was realistic and still managed to melt hearts. At least that's what I felt. In Chandigarh Kade Ashiki, which happens to be one of the few movies in Bollywood that show trans people without portraying them as eunuchs, quite unlike the really, really horrible Lakshmi bomb, it at least treated the subject and community with the respect they deserve.
That really, really horrible is so on point.
Like, man, basic respect. Please, please.
Also, our bar is so low. It's so sad.
It's practically on the floor. Please. Don't dig a tunnel underground. Also, there's two special mentions for the OTT platforms. One, the first for Kabir Mehra and Made in Heaven. Well, technically not Bollywood, it ruthlessly quashed the false opinion that all gay men are feminine. With a layered storyline and developed character, I simply fell in love with the show. Absolutely cannot wait for the next season. And then, second, Human, a series on vaccine trials starring Shefali Shah and Kirti Kulari in the main roles. While I stand Shefali Shah, she's my queen, and her character is so complex and I genuinely cannot describe what her character is. Please watch the show if you're able to, and trigger warnings and everything. In Kirti Kulari plays a closeted lesbian woman already married to a heterosexual man who cheats on him and lies to him and is like complex characters again. It's something that cannot be described. But none of this was fetishized and it was not male gaze that we saw through it. So like, yay, progress, but yay, please, we need a feel-good queer story. Please, a feel-good someone with their happy ending.
Have you guys noticed one thing? Nearly the entirety of like Indian queer cinema or any sort of Indian queer representation in the visual form, at least, maybe not literature, is still about the coming out saga. Like, I think that's only the stage one of life, right? Beyond that, we still haven't accepted, like, haven't explored how normal a queer life is, which is still where we need to get to.
Yeah. And this is, I don't know if you guys have seen Schitts Creek. Have you, all of you seen Schitts Creek?
Yes.
So,
parts of it.
Did you watch the post-production video?
Yes,
I did.
I weep even now.
Yeah, I love that post-production video, and the point they make about how this is like a one normal show about a queer person's life, where it is like a normal thing, like a society that treats it normally. What would it be like? Otherwise, all our queer narratives in all kind of shows and movies is generally just like sad and tragic.
Yeah, and one of angst and pain, and oh my god, yes, I'm not denying that is a very, very big part.
It's very much there.
But there is also the normalcy of being queer, which I'd love to see in Indian cinema.
Yeah.
Connecting with Schitt's Creek, even Brooklyn Nine-Nine. I mean, there's only two characters who are queer, but it's not their entire storyline. They are more than their sexuality. And I think that's one of the best parts of the show.
Yeah.
And even the jokes are handled really respectfully. Even if they're like the punchline, the couple, I think it never comes off as crass, like, Dostana felt.
It's not on their sexuality, but maybe their actions.
Well, not their actions, but like the relationship.
That's in a normal way. You'd even mock a heterosexual couple like that. So nothing to do with their sexuality.
So on that note, we come to the end of this segment. We will be back after a short break. You are listening to Press Decode on the IVM Podcast Network.
Hey, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On Storytellers and Storytellers, Vineet talks to Aparna aka Rogstream and Kangana aka Mystic Ignite, two of India's most popular gaming streamers who are taking over the internet. The conversation takes us through their growth journeys as female gamers and how they overcame trolling. On Smarter with Sid talks about the new Netflix documentary on Kanye West, Genius. Sid also talks about the hustle that Kanye went through and tells us about 3 things that we can learn from him. On the Musafir Stories podcast, we have a returning guest, Anirudh Kanisetti. He discusses Elora and his debut book, Lords of the Deccan. Congratulations so much to Anirudh. Anirudh's been a podcaster with us for numerous years. We're so happy for him. This is a great book. You should definitely check it out. Do check out Anirudh's show as well, Echoes of India, and he's done another show called Yuddha. And on Cock and Bull, Cyrus is joined by comedians Naveen Narona and Shreyas Manohar. They discuss the new Commissioner of Mumbai and his announcements. They talk about the new rules for passport verification and how China has announced a lockdown again. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of our other shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. Also, don't forget to rate us on any platform that you might be listening to us. You can also check us out on YouTube. We have a webpage, ivmpodcast.com/YouTube, where a list of all our channels are. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors this week, SBI Life Insurance, Bank of Baroda, India Water Portal, and Max Life Insurance. Thank you so much for making this possible.
Welcome back to Press Decode on the IVM Podcast Network. It's time for our final segment this week, Roast or Toast. And since I am hosting, I will go first. I'm back on Least Fave this week. And on Monday, Zomato founder Dipinder Goyal announced that the company will be launching 10-minute food delivery services. He added that this would be made possible by installing finishing stations near high-demand neighborhoods, which will stock 20 to 30 best-selling dishes from local restaurants that usually have high demand in those neighborhoods. And it is honestly so ridiculous to me. Not only is it now less safe for delivery partners because they're racing against time and traffic and roads, it is just simply exploitative. Then there's the question of the food, because I thought of it and how are these finishing stations going to ensure quality and freshness if they're being stored for the sole purpose of being delivered at lightning speed? If I went to a sit-down restaurant and they handed me my food in 10 minutes, I'd be like, something's up here.
Very valid.
I want to bring up Zomato doubled down and said, oh, we're not unsafe, we're hygienic, we're everything. Which is all the more balls.
Yeah, but they do have a history of...
Sorry to be so wonderfully eloquent, but how?
But also, I feel like that once you, let's say in the beginning, they're good with it also. Once it becomes a thing, you lose that.
That's true.
These days, I don't feel like ordering in anything because it doesn't come to me in a good condition. It just doesn't. Somehow.
What?
Yeah, I don't want to, you tell me more. It just doesn't come in a good condition. It's it's cold. Sometimes they've delivered me the wrong thing. And because they basically now captured the market.
I think it's
just
you, Vagda.
It's probably because I have a thing with Zomato.
Yeah.
Okay. So I am continuing my grumpy self. I have a least fave item this week. Which is that you might not be able to use your ex's Netflix password for too long. The company is really suffering on the growth front, and it's decided to crack down on people sharing their Netflix passwords with those who don't live in the same household anymore. It'll basically prompt you into paying an extra fee for the privilege of sharing your password or using somebody else's password. Good thing it's not coming to India yet. Netflix is testing it in Chile, Costa Rica, and Peru for now.
Phew.
Not good.
I'm not even too annoyed because there's nothing good on Netflix anyway, so...
Ouch.
What? No, all the K-dramas are on it.
Moving on swiftly, so Prafula and Nivedita don't say other things. I once again have a fave item this week. What is happening?
You
But
are
hear me
a
out.
different person.
Well, I think this item screams me, okay? The latest internet trend is dubbed goblin mode. And I quote, the term embraces the comforts of depravity. So think stuffing your face with too many packets of ramen while watching shameful reality television shows just hold up in bed, aka most of my Friday evenings on season 3 of the pandemic. Someone on The Guardian rightly described it as goblin mode is kind of the opposite of trying to better yourself. I think that's the kind of energy that going into 2022. Everyone's just kind of wild and insane right now. Honestly, amen, sister. This is exactly the energy I envisioned for the year, and I'm glad I have a word for it. So, goblin up, folks. We're only 1/4 of the year down.
Okay, so my fave item of the week was the video of a single cyclist stopping an entire convoy of anti-vax truckers. So what happened was that these bunch of truckers who really don't want to get vaccinated against COVID took out a convoy in Washington, D.C. And these huge guys and the trucks almost crawled to a stop when this single cyclist, like these really thin bike, stopped in front of the first truck and simply decided to ride the cycle very slowly. Like the guts on that guy, honestly, serious admiration from me. I start feeling weird if I'm taking too long in a grocery queue. Hats off to this guy, honestly, man.
And I couldn't help but imagine what it would be like in India. This would never work in India. Never.
Oh, no.
Why are you saying? I want to know why you're saying this.
Because, I mean, even though there is just one lane for the traffic to move on one side, do you feel like that the truck is not going to overtake from the left or the right?
Listen, one way does not.
But they're not even
if
going to wait for overtaking. If this happens in North India, especially, someone's just going to come out, grab him by the collar and push him to the side.
Yes.
Oh, throwback to Delhi.
And on that note, that was our show. Thank you so much for joining us on Press Decode. You can catch us every Thursday on the IVM Podcast Network. And guys, please remember, don't let the news give you the blues.
Love fighting?
We've got you covered.
Check out our show, The Fighting Goat, where we, the voices of the internet, Arjun Chipalkatti and Somesh Kamra, bring to you crazy weekly action on your favorite combat show, The Fighting Goat.
Be it commentary, breakdown, predictions, analysis of styles and techniques.
And of course, your round of favorite fighters.
You can listen to us every Thursday on the IVM Podcast app, website and all major podcast streaming platforms.
सफर, रास्ते, मंजिल और मुकाम अक्सर ये हमसे कुछ कहना चाहते हैं, पर हम हैं कि अपनी रोजमर्रा की जिंदगी में इन्हें सुनने से कतराते हैं। नमस्ते दोस्तों, मेरा नाम है केशव चतुर्वेदी और मैं आपको ले चलूंगा कुछ ऐसे सफर पर जहां आपको एक नया नजरिया मिलेगा सफर और मंजिलों को देखने का। आइए इन किस्से कहानियों में डूब जाएं। हर मंगलवार और शुक्रवार